time now to go through the papers. Joining us in the studio to do that is the former Daily Star editor Dawn Neeson and the actor Christopher Biggins. A very good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Why don't we kick off, shall we, Biggins, with the front page of The Guardian? And ministers have been accused, and we've mentioned it on the programme already, of having this sort of Wild West attitude to national security.
Well, I know. I mean, this is the allegations that, of course, Truss's phone was hacked by the Russians, and this is, you know, a serious breach of security. I don't know what she was probably talking about. What do you think? I mean,
dread to think.
No, exactly. You know, what she was going to wear the following day, what shoe she was going to wear or something, you know. But anyway, I think it is a serious thing, because they're saying that they think that people are using their devices for private reasons. And I think what they should do is they should have probably a work mobile. But I mean, I think it's impossible to curb this, though, isn't it?
Well, this is technologically, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, very.
Anything you do on your phone is open.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, a lot of people have been hacked over the years and got a lot of money back from it.
Yeah. Were you ever hacked in that scandal?
Possibly.
Oh, there you go. You see, but it's very. This is the problem. It's very easily done.
It is, and of course the trouble is now we've got so many security on our own financial things. You know, people hacking us about money, and you know you don't know what to believe. You know, you get these emails and texts from people, and you think I'm going to ignore it. Then of course you get into trouble with people who really are trying to get money from you to pay for things.
How much of this, then, The Guardian does point at this? How much of it is about cabinet culture and people just either being naive or not following proper procedure?
Well, I think naive is a very good word. I mean, I think that's the question. You know, how up are you in these sort of things? I mean, I think the problem is we rely on all these things so much that it's bound to happen. You know, people are bound to, because it's easy. You know, even we on this panel could do something, could do some hacking.
Oh, no.
If we wanted to.
I'll tell you what, it'll be interesting. It will be very interesting. Dawn, can we have a look at COP27 in the Telegraph?
Yes, we absolutely have to.
Yeah, well, look. When we talked about this yesterday, we just got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails from our viewers and listeners saying, no, we shouldn't be going to, Rishi Sunak should not be going to COP27. Focus on what's happening at home.
And this is the reason that Rishi Sunak has said that indeed he's not going, and has advised our King Charles not to go either. It's being held in Sharm el Sheikh, and it's where the great and the good get together, often flying in on their private jets, to talk about what they are going to do to save the planet, as I said, while flying on their private jets. And then they come away and issue this diktat that none of us can have our 2-week holiday in Spain because we are destroying the planet. And we saw this with COP26 in Glasgow, didn't we? Where, I mean, you know, not only flying in on private jets, but Biden and his huge motorcade turning up, and then the hilarious fact that, you know, they were the delegates at COP26 were using electric cars, but they didn't have enough charging points to charge the electric cars, so they had to ship in a load of generators to fire the electric cars up.
But to burn the diesel to
burn, yeah, no, absolutely, Stephen. So, I mean, I think, you know, Rishi Sunak does have a point here. There is now some debate about whether he might go or not, and as other people have pointed out, well, ministers are going to attend the World Cup. Rumours Boris Johnson's going to go to COP. Well, I mean, it's, you know, to be fair to Boris Johnson, he has had a green agenda from day one, hasn't he? Possibly something to do with his wife, and Stanley Johnson, his dad, has always been very, very involved in climate change and getting that message across. So, there's nothing stopping him going, Boris Johnson. But I think Rishi Sunak's point is, like, I think people expect me to stay here and sort out the economic and the financial crisis and the pressures, the domestic pressures on people here. And it does look a bit wrong for so many all gathering in one place when, as we all learned during lockdown, a phone call can do the job just as well.
And Zoom too. I mean, they could all Zoom.
Yeah.
You know, I think there is a point about not going. I really do, because I think it's, you know, it's so easily resolved with technology again.
Absolutely, yeah. Provided you don't get your phone hacked, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they could hack that, because, I mean, it's good. I mean, they never seem to come out with anything anyway.
No, you're right.
You may disagree with us. Let us know if you do. GBNEWS@gbnews.uk.
Should we look at the Metro, Biggins? A third of public sector staff to leave over pay.
Yes, I mean 1.8 million expected to leave because they want a pay rise. But everybody wants a pay rise.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really economic problem, I think. You know, there's so much that I don't know where we stop. I mean, because, you know, there are strikes going on. I mean, do we suddenly borrow a huge amount of money to pay everybody? I mean, it's a very difficult thing. And, you know, I think saying that they're all going to leave is fine. But then I think there are other people who will come in and take those jobs.
Yeah, well, yeah. Where are they going to go? If they've got a cost, if they're struggling with money, what are they going to do?
Exactly. What other jobs are there for them? I mean, it's a real problem, and everybody wants to have money in the bank to pay all the bills and things. But I don't think the answer is leaving the job.
No.
I think, you know, I mean, I know people have to be strong, and we have to do this thing, but it worries me that we're doing too much of it.
The trouble is, it's a bitter pill which needs to be taken, which is sort of easier for us to say because we're not struggling to heat or eat.
No.
Isn't it? That's the problem, and I know people sometimes get annoyed with this, and I understand why. But the problem is, if you give everyone an inflation levelling pay rise, then all that does is push up inflation.
I know.
Which is then we're back where we started.
But this is what started back in the 70s with the winter of discontent, wasn't it? I mean, It's like, you know, inflation busting pay rises, they were called at the time, were given out, which led to everybody wanting one. And it's just physically impossible to give everybody in the country an inflation matching pay rise. I mean, the problem with this story is that these are the key workers we're talking about. They are the people responsible for keeping our lights running, for collecting our rubbish. And many of them are incredibly poorly paid. And these are the key workers that kept the country going during the pandemic, and we all stood, not just the NHS, we all stood there and clapped for them, etc., etc. And now they quite rightly want a decent pay rise, and we're saying there's no money available. I mean, if you couldn't see this coming round the corner when we were locking things down and stopping people working during the pandemic, then you were pretty stupid. I mean, but as you say, you can't give everybody that pay rise. It's impossible.
And earlier this morning on your programme, there was this, you know, £10 worth of groceries for a penny.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, or was it a pound? Sorry, it was a pound. A penny. You know, and this is happening all the time. I mean, you know, it's appalling to think that we have to have food banks in order to feed people. Thank God we do. But, you know, it is a terrible situation. I mean, you know, I'm sure all of us on this panel today, if we had the wherewithal, we would give everybody whatever they wanted. But it's impossible to do that.
You can't do it.
Without exacerbating the problem further. Shall we look at the Times, Dawn? And it's galling what's happened over the weekend.
This is absolutely terrifying. This is I mean, it's in all the papers and on most of the front pages actually at some point. This is a motorist who firebombed a migrant processing centre in Dover yesterday before supposedly killing himself at a nearby petrol station. We don't know the attacker hasn't been named yet, but evidently drove down there. It's the main processing centre down in Dover, and threw a petrol bomb at the centre where new migrants had just arrived. I believe there were 1,000 migrants arrived on Saturday alone, and then drove to the nearest petrol. I mean, this happened in the middle of the day, 11 o'clock in the morning, and this person is supposed to have driven over 100 miles, which makes you think maybe from the London area, to get to the centre just to do this. We don't know the reasons yet at all, but obviously it's an incredibly divisive area at the moment, with the whole Suella Braverman and the whole processing centre down at Marston Airport in saying, you know, the legal row going on over that now. It's illegal, you can't do it, the government will be sued, more money, etc., etc. Nobody seems to know what the answer is to this problem.
No.
But people are quite clearly getting incredibly angry.
But this is the problem, Higgins, isn't it? I mean, obviously what this man has done is a terrible thing, right? But it shows that unless action is taken, this anger that Dawn talks about, and anger from some people and just frustration from others is going to grow.
It is, and you know, people want to make a point of saying something and doing something about it, which you understand. I mean, it is terrifying, though, that this, you know, someone's lost their life, he's lost his... I mean, it's just not on, but you understand why they do it. I mean, you know, people mucking up the system on roads. You know, the group.
Extinction Rebellion.
Exactly. You know, I mean, we sympathise with them, but what they're doing is wrong because it's affecting other people. I mean, you know, ambulances aren't allowed to get through. Then, you know, doctors. You know, it is a real. You understand their enthusiasm for doing something like that, but it's wrong way of doing it.
You know what? It links to the story we were just talking about with people not being able to afford heating or eating, and you know, the taxpayers are reading this thinking it's costing between 6.8 and 7 million a day to house migrants in hotels, and they will have warmth, they will have food, and there are taxpayers who are, as we've just discussed, struggling to pay their bills, worried about turning their heating on, thinking, well, why are they being put up in hotels? I can't afford to heat my own home.
No.
I think part of the problem that the Home Secretary's faced is that outcry over the hotels meant they say, OK, no more hotels, we'll put them in these centres instead, but they are clearly inhumane where they are.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you know, no one thinks this system is perfect, but what we need is someone to come up with an answer, and fairly soon, because, you know, tensions are running very high at the moment.
You can't let more things like this happen.
No, of course not. It's appalling what's happened. I mean, you know, thankfully, no one at this centre, you know, was hurt or injured, but I mean, it's just...
Well, there by the grace of God, I think.
Well, quite, Stephen.
Let's cheer ourselves up, Biggin, should we? With the NHS winter crisis.
Absolutely. But I went the other day to my doctor, and I had one arm was COVID and the other arm was flu, and I had no reaction, thank goodness. And I think people should be doing this. You should go and have both injections. I mean, you know, the national health is under great strain, as we know, but there are fantastic things, especially if you're of a certain age, that you can get. I mean, you know, you should have all these things because it is going to help the NHS in the end.
Well, I always think it's a responsibility so that you are taking potential strain off the system.
Absolutely. And you know, it's there and it's free and, you know, people can use it. And it's in the end, it is helping so many other people. That is what is so good about it. And, you don't, the people who say, oh, you know, I don't want to get ill by having them, it depends on the person.
Yeah.
You know, you can't say,
You might get a bit of a sniffle. It's not going to do you much.
No.
With a flu jab, at least.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I just, you know, you just feel better for knowing you've had that and you're going to perhaps protect yourself in this winter of discontent which is going to come soon.
The headline is that the NHS is facing its worst winter on record. This is another one of those stories. Every year we're going to have the same headline, aren't we?
We have had the same headline. I've been working on newspapers for over 35 years now, Rosie. Obviously, I was a child when I started. And every year I feel like we have been writing stories about the NHS with the word crisis inserted after it. And I remember going back over the years, pictures of people lying on stretchers in hospital, waiting lists, ambulance times, etc., etc., etc. So we do appear to do this story every year. Obviously, when you add in the COVID and the lockdown situation and the huge backlog we have now for all NHS services, it's the perfect storm. So, I mean, it probably is a crisis as opposed to the crisis we've had in the past.
Yeah. Let's have a look at the FT, and this is good. If you're watching in Northern Ireland, you'll understand this better than any of us because it gets so complicated, doesn't it? So the Power Sharing Executive, the Northern Ireland Assembly, hasn't been meeting for a while. This time it's down to the DUP. So now an election has been called, which is probably going to take place in December, which is cost £6 million. And when that happens, nothing actually is likely to change. It's not going to change anything. So Micheál Martin, the Taoiseach, has said the power sharing model is not fit for purpose, and he may have a point.
Well, he may have a point, but what is the alternative? This is what we keep coming back to with so many of the stories we discuss on a daily basis now in the papers. You know, the power sharing agreement was the landmark peace deal that 1998, wasn't it? And it basically compulsory coalitions so that one side could not govern without the other.
Yes.
And it seems to have jogged along, sort of okay, never perfect. But it has meant that it has been more peaceful in Northern Ireland.
But it's also easier to grind things up because it's that strange situation where the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister actually have the same amount of power.
Yes.
So if one side pulls out, it all stops.
It all stops, and this is the situation. And I'm sure that, you know, the good people of Northern Ireland now, the last thing that they're facing the same financial situation
Or worse
we all
in some
are, or
respects.
worse in many cases. And they are thinking now the last thing we need is for politics again to be put on hold. No decisions are made. No help is coming with inflation, with fuel bills, with the cost of living, etc., etc. While we have yet another election. It's like the NHS in crisis. What the actual answers are not that easy. I mean, the power sharing is not a perfect solution, but no one seems to have one that actually is.
Any ideas on it, Christopher?
I wish I did, because I'd make a fortune.
You would, wouldn't you?
And I'd help them enormously because they need the help. But I mean, it's a situation which can't be solved.
No.
Sadly.
No, I just don't know what anyone's going to do with that. I really don't. Dawn Biggins, for now, thank you very much indeed. We'll catch up with you a little bit later.